for numerous times now. When you look at the net worth of Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, like you have to divide all these net worth by 10, at least, at the very least. It's still very good for them, right? But you have to divide it by 10 because if they start selling, liquidating their position, um, they will have to sell down the stock significantly. Now, why would they have to liquidate their position? Well, because they have stock. They cannot buy bread with the stock. So you have to convert locked liquidity into like accessible liquidity, right? That's why they would have to do this. And it's relevant to this monetary system current financial system that I'm going to describe. So as a user, as an investor, I invest $1 million in a startup at 20% equity. I'm the first investor. So therefore, I'm valuing this startup at $5 million. Now, it's not that this startup all of a sudden created value for $5 million. That's like the valuation of value just because they have the same root does not mean the same thing, right? Value is when people actually paid you, like it's actual revenue, right? That's value. Valuation is just valuation. That's how we value it. Does not mean that that's how much value really provided to the people. You could argue it did because investors just bought it, and that's how they value this thing. But they didn't buy the whole company. They just bought 20% of that company, and then we extrapolate the other 80% at the same exact price. That's what happens. So it's definitely a bubble type of thing to value things like this. Now, will gold be valued like this? Well, yes, obviously, because everything is valued like this. Is it fair? That's for each of us to decide, but we're going to be essentially utilizing the same mechanisms that are other projects utilize, like Amazon and Facebook and Bitcoin, in a similar fashion. But I just want you to understand that valuation does not mean liquidity at all. The whole point of this presentation is to show to you that there has been only $1 million worth of liquidity. That's it. And all of a sudden, $5 million of valuation has been created. So this is already leveraged, as you can see. It's already 1 to 5 leveraged, right? Because it's $1 million versus of actual liquidity, actual cash, versus $5 million of fugazi. But then the investor goes to the bank and says, hey, let's assume that's a marketable security, right? Let's assume that startup is a marketable security. So that investor goes to the bank and says, hey, cool. I have this 20% of equity. I don't have $1 million anymore. This $20 million of equity, 20% of equity is worth $1 million. I have all the paperwork to show. Give me a loan. Let's assume that the bank does not introduce any discounts to liquidity at this moment, right? Let's assume the bank just says, okay, fine, I'll just give you $1 million worth of loan. In reality, the bank will probably give like maybe 70%, 50% worth of it, right? But for the sake of the example, just to make it easier, let's assume it's 100%. The bank just gives $1 million worth of loan for that equity holding. So now the investor has $1 million extra. What does he do? He goes back to the startup and say, hey, I want to buy another portion of your company for $1 million. But the startup says, hey, wait a second. Our previous valuation has been $5 million, but how about we sell it at a high valuation? Maybe they introduce some, new intellectual property type of play, right? Maybe some new, whatever, some new methodology, maybe some new client list, maybe they created a product and actually sold it. So anything could happen. So the startup says, hey, $10 million valuation now. So instead of 20% equity, you can only get 10% equity in exchange for the second $1 million. So this is the second $1 million. So investor now gets the previous 20% equity plus 10% equity from this round. So now investor has 30% equity of this valuation. So how this game works out is this: 30% equity at $10 million valuation is equal to $3 million. So he goes back to the bank and say, hey, listen, like, you already gave me $1 million for my $1 million collateral, but my collateral increased in value. Now it's $3 million collateral. Give me more loan. And the bank says, sure, I'll give you another $2 million. Why another $2 million? The bank already gave $1 million. Now the bank will give another $2 million. Okay, so the collateral is worth $3 million on the paper, and the bank gives you $3 million loan. You go back to the startup. Obviously, why would you not do this? You go back to the same startup and say, hey, I want to buy even more of your company. The startup says, hey, wait a second. Let's increase the valuation even more. Like we keep growing, right? Now, of course, the growth, as you can see, is very fucking leveraged. It's not like 1-for-1. It's very leveraged. But the investor gives the additional $2 million into the company, and the company says, okay, now let's value ourselves at $50 million. So therefore, you can only get 2.5% equity. And investor says, fine. Why would he say that's fine? Because he goes back to the bank. Now he owns, um, sorry, different slide, this one. Now he owns 32.5%, right? Remember, 10%, 20% first round, 10% second round, 2.5% third round. So he has 32.5% equity. But if we extrapolate that 32.5% from the $50 million valuation, he has $16 million worth of value as collateral. He goes to the bank, and the bank can give him another $13 million of loan. That's how the system works. Now, of course, it's significantly oversimplified, has to be a very marketable startup. But when we're talking about large investors like BlackRock, those JP Morgan Asset Management, like those investors who actually buy stuff, right? Like retail mom and pops, like I'm not sure if they represent even 1% of the overall, purchasing power. Maybe, how to say, maybe on the back end, they do, and then BlackRock would then take that money, from those users, from those investors, and just kind of reinvest. But it's lots of the stuff is highly institutionalized. So those big guys can buy Amazon stock, go to the bank, and ask for a loan, and keep buying the stock. And that's what they're doing. That's how the system works. So what is this? I think this is the wrong slide. Okay, so what happened? Let's just outline what happened. So far as actual liquidity, the startup received $4 million. $1 million initial, the second $1 million borrowed from the bank, and then the $2 million also borrowed from the bank. Now, of course, to that, we could technically add the other $13 million, but investor did not invest that money yet. Investors just could get a loan for $13 million, but the investor did not invest it yet. So this specific snapshot, $4 million of actual cash has been invested. Okay? That's actual cash. But how much money has been created? $16 million of money has been created through debt, because that's how much the bank gave out in loans. And therefore the total debt is $16 million. So these two even each other out. The startup did not receive the remaining $12 million, right? Yet. They only received $4 million. But the valuation of the startup is already $50 million. So as you can see, the money he has created at leverage, so from perspective of actual liquidity invested in the startup, the money created is 4x here. But even if that's not fair, comparison, because again, the investor still has another $12 million to be invested somewhere, not necessarily into this startup, maybe somewhere else. But as far as valuation, the valuation is $50 million, while the actual liquidity has only been $4 million. And we can say that's cool. Like, that's amazing. Like, I'm a good guy. Like, I'm a smart, like, if a VC fund does this, the VC fund is celebrated as the most genius investor ever alive. Because they were able to invest just $4 million and get significant upside on the investment. Because it's almost more than 12.5x, right? Because it's $4 million invested, you get $50 million valuation. However, that $50 million is on a piece of paper. It's not liquid. The actual liquidity is still just $4 million. So now we have to find the exit liquidity. That's why VC funds have been such heavily interested in entering the Web3 space, because with Web3, you have exit liquidity immediately. So you don't care about the white paper. You don't care about the team. You don't care about anything. All you care about is community. Is there enough hype? Because if there's enough hype, I can give the money to the startup, type it up using marketing resources. Most of those resources are mine as a VC, so you can essentially you pay me back as a startup, so I keep making money on you. You as a startup proxy, you as a Web3 startup, you are the proxy for bringing all these users. And then since the token is available day one, or let's assume even up to 1 year vesting, it's still like very, very, like, how to say, from liquidity access perspective, it's insane. You can sell your liquidity on the retail investors, and therefore you're good. So you just made a lot of money very fast. So essentially what you did with Web3, because you are, a scumbag VC investor, you poured all that exit liquidity onto the retail, exited, made your whatever 5, 10x, you lucky, but you totally crushed the Web3 space. Because retail investors don't know any better. That's what you did. Congratulations. So you killed the whole freaking space, and now you have to keep doing this because you still support the current financial system that is leveraging liquidity. So you do not change the system because you're a fucking idiot. You made some money. You think that, you did, amazing, but you have to keep doing this. And you did this successfully for the first couple of years, but it does not guarantee that you'll do this successfully for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And then the system will keep crushing you. So you have to keep scamming everybody. That's the system, right? In order to be living okay. But that obviously creates lots of tension in the society. And your kids will live in this society. So whom did you help? I do not know. It's a super short-term thinking. To just support the current financial system. If you want to bridge from Web3 utopia to Web3 reality and reclaim your rights of privacy, financial autonomy, and ownership, join the Ghost ecosystem by visiting chain.ghostchain.io. You can find all the necessary links in the video description below.